Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast where we do our best to own our own stories, love ourselves, and thrive as we become more mentally stable, emotionally healthy, and physically well with each passing day. Tonight's episode gets real about something that far too many parents, teachers, and students deal with behind the scenes, but not nearly enough people talk about in public. What it's like for kids with disabilities in school settings and how broken the systems around them can be. We talk about the confusion, the miscommunications, the stigma, and the flat-out failures that happen when schools aren't equipped to support kids who need accommodations, whether that's for medical conditions, mental health challenges, neurodivergence, or anything in between. And just to be clear, we're not only talking about visible disabilities. Most of the time, the issues aren't something you can see, and that's often where the problems start. If you're a parent of a kid with a 504 plan or an IEP, or if you've ever had to fight just to make sure your child could participate safely and fairly in class, you already know the uphill battle. If you've never had to sit in a room full of administrators and justify why your kid deserves the same access to education as everyone else, I'm so glad. But I hope this conversation helps you understand what it's like for those of us who have. Today I'm talking with Shannon Addison. She's a mom, an advocate, and a creative force who turned some pretty personal and painful experiences into a mission to help kids, especially girls, navigate friendships, emotional health, and social conflict with more empathy and confidence. She also knows firsthand what it's like to parent a child with a chronic medical condition and what happens when the schools, systems, and other students don't know how to respond to that kind of difference. We talk about bullying, anxiety, invisible disabilities, and the emotional toll it takes on kids when they're misunderstood or outright dismissed. We also talk about what parents can do, whether you're just starting out and trying to figure out what the hell a 504 plan even is, or you've been in the fight a while and you're running low on steam. This conversation doesn't sugarcoat it, and it gets into the messiness and the frustration. But it also points to some ways forward, not just through accommodations and advocacy, but through emotional intelligence, social learning, and storytelling. And yes, even baking. Shannon's work brings together character building and confidence building in a way that's playful without being patronizing, and real without being preachy. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or someone who just wants to understand the challenges disabled kids face in schools, this episode is worth your time. And if you've ever felt alone or overwhelmed while trying to support a kid who's struggling, this one's for you. All right, let's get into my conversation with Shannon Addison. All right, excellent. Okay, everybody should be able to see and hear and all that good stuff. Hello and welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I am really excited for our conversation tonight. I think this is going to be a great one. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. We do have a question queue open if you are interested in asking any questions. Our topic tonight is disabilities and youth in schools. We're going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about anxiety, just a little bit about parenting in school and kids and youth in general. So feel free to ask any questions while we are here, while we are live. I am also, if you are here with us on Twitch, I'm going to open a giveaway that you are welcome to enter. This is for a free baking box and a free catch the match game. So exclamation point chicken dinner will put you into that. We'll put you into that giveaway. So feel free to. Oh, you know what? I better change this tag that says giveaway into chicken dinner. I forgot about that. Let me do that, and we will get rolling here. Giveaway, live Q&A. There we go. Listen, sometimes you got to do last minute things, last minute on the fly. That's okay. But I am joined tonight by the wonderful Shannon Addison. Shannon, thank you for taking the time out today to join us.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here and love talking about this particular topic, especially considering that I have a child with a disability and know what it's like to parent a child with a disability. And I can imagine right now there's a lot of fear and confusion and frustration with parents. So I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, there most definitely is. I also have a kid with a disability, and it's sometimes it's really scary whenever you're not sure about anything. It's one of those things that's
Hmm.
like, I got to figure all this out on my own. And it can be really daunting just to kind of start. Where do you even start and all of that? So, but we're going to get
Exactly.
in. We're going to get into all of that. Really
We
excited
are.
for this. I think it's going to be wonderful. If you guys want to enter the giveaway, again, exclamation point chicken dinner, and we'll get that going. But if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. So today I am talking with Shannon Addison. She is a writer, a speaker, and a mom who turned personal experience into purpose. After seeing the impact of relational aggression and anxiety in her daughter's life, she created My Crummy World, a story driven brand that helps young girls build confidence, navigate friendships, and strengthen emotional health through engaging stories, baking activities, and problem solving adventures. Her characters, the breadcrumbs, which you might see right behind her there, empower kids in a fun and relatable way. Shannon is passionate about helping parents and educators foster strong emotional connections with young girls, and I am excited to dive into her insights on disabilities and youth in schools. If you are looking to connect with Shannon anywhere, I have several socials for you. It looks like Haplo is here from Threads, so you're already able to connect right there. But if you are looking for website, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and post links for you guys. If you go and you join her on any of those, give her a follow, make sure you grab a couple of posts, put a comment on them, give them a like. All those things help the algorithm. That's really what helps that discoverability. So make sure that you do that as a personal favor to me, of course. So, Shannon, I'm really excited to dive into this. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experiences and what made you become interested in working with kids, especially with this focus on mental health?
Absolutely. So when my daughters were young and I had an opportunity to spend time volunteering at the school, I it allowed me to really take a look at what was going on in schools. And the first thing I noticed watching girls, especially girls interacting at lunch, and I talk about this a lot with people when I talk about my why and where it started. But it was fascinating to me to see. I was watching the girls at the next lunch table, and the fact that there were two girls that were picking on another girl,
Mm,
and they were able to do this under the watchful eye of the lunch aide and other adults, teachers that were in the room. And it's because girls have become very adept at flying under the radar with respect to cruelty and bullying type behaviors.
mm,
And this took me back to my own experiences when I was in fifth grade and a bystander problem that I had because when I was not the one being picked on, oftentimes I was not helping the person who was being picked on because
mm-hmm,
I was fearful that I was going to be the next target. But as I watched this and I saw, it's like looking at this and thinking, not only do girls have to deal with this at school, they can't escape it. I could. When I was in fifth grade, I could go home and my problems essentially were gone until I got up and went to school.
mm-hmm,
And that became my biggest issue is I didn't want to go to school most days. But girls can't hide from it now because it's always there. They social media and their phones and it just constantly follows them. So as I watched this in my daughter's school and I started thinking about how much worse it's gotten, I went home and I had a discussion with my mom, who was both an educator and a guidance counselor. She had master's degrees in both education and counseling. And I said to her, girls need tools. They need something. I feel like this is a behavioral problem that has never been disrupted. And so I started just kind of diving into all kinds of research about what's happening with girls. And I stumbled onto a book that is a book I highly recommend to people called Little Girls Can Be Mean. It's not a very new book, it's an older book, but it really dives into what's happening with girls and why. And specifically what it what it really pointed out to me was that there's a window of opportunity with girls right at about third grade, 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there, where you still have quite a bit of influence over changing their behavioral patterns because their identities are not fully set and they still respect
mm,
adult figures or authority figures. So there's some research that suggests that this is a prime opportunity, but there's not a whole lot of tools that are available to parents. And it was like this light bulb. I thought, oh my goodness, if I can start developing some way of communicating messages to these girls and providing tools to parents, maybe we can start affecting change with girls at this age so that they grow up to become much better humans when they hit, say, middle school. And that's where,
Mhm.
I mean, everything unravels in middle school. And that's
Yeah.
when kids are desperately trying to figure stuff out. And at that point, most girls' identities are pretty set. And that's why you see so much more of the cruelty and the bullying and everything else that goes along with it that just transfers right with those girls as they move through the school system. So I bounced this whole thing off of my mom at the time. She is no longer with us, sadly. But at that time, she said, "Oh my goodness, this is tremendous." And so I kind of coupled that thinking with this idea that I've always been fascinated by, and that is that if you leave a trail of breadcrumbs that you can find your way back if you ever get lost. And I thought, we live in a society where girls are lost, and so they can follow a trail of breadcrumbs. And so I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning and thought, I'm going to create breadcrumbs and there'll be characters. And so Penelope Pumpernickel, Rachel Rice, Samantha Sourdough, Whitney Wheat, and PJ, Penelope's little sister, and her dog Pepper, they were born out of that idea, and they started leaving a trail, and the trail is stories and now recipes. I mean, at that time, I actually did not have recipes for all the different kinds of bread. Somebody actually said to me, "Why aren't you doing something with baking? They're all made of bread." And I mean, you look at them; they have bread heads.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, I literally taught myself how to bake all the different kinds of breads, and I broke it all down into the most simplistic format and the simplest terms, put it into a baking interactive baking book, and now I have My Crummy Guide to Baking and Friendship Making, which has recipes, but it also has stories and lessons and discussion prompts for parents. It's filled with tools for parents to start having the types of conversations that you need to have with your kids at the right age so that they are prepared to discuss a lot of these things that are going on. And these issues are happening with their friends. And there are parents who say, I don't really know how to even broach the topic.
Mhm.
Well, I'll show you how. It's not that hard. And it's so organic to have that kind of conversation in the kitchen, which I know that's a terrible pun, but that's a great place to do it where they don't feel like they're being interrogated. They
Mm.
actually, it feels like the conversation just flows naturally while you're doing something together. So you're making a connection and you're also developing the right kinds of communication. So that was really how it all came about. And of course, when I first started this, I had no idea that my youngest daughter, who is now an adult, that she would be subjected to even
Mm.
oh, it went so far beyond what I had seen through elementary school by the time she got to middle school and high school. And because she was diagnosed with a chronic medical condition, which from that point became a disability of hers that we had to deal with. And with that, I I really got a lot more insight into just how cruel girls can be.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed everything. And I had to step back from my business for years to care for her. And that again forced me not only to look at my business differently, but I had to look at this demographic a little bit differently too. I looked at girls and the way that they were relating to one another completely differently because I was seeing it through a lens of somebody who was going through so much torture.
Mhm.
And so now I talk about it pretty passionately with parents because it's become, it's just become kind of the center of why I do what I do. I mean, when I'm out talking about this and saying I really want to grow a kinder generation of girls, I mean it
Mhm.
because my daughter didn't walk at her own high school graduation because she was too anxious to be in the same room with three specific people. And I don't want other parents to go through that, and you don't
Yeah.
have to. But only if we really start taking a look at what's broken
Mhm.
with respect to how girls relate to each other and why they do what they do and start making some changes. And that's going to require parents to open their eyes and start paying attention to what is going on. So that's kind of the broad. And when I talk about this, I mean, I'm really talking about it from the vantage point of, yeah, you really want to be in tune with your kid to figure out if somebody's not being nice to them, if they're being bullied, but there's also the parents that have to look at their kids and ask very tough questions, because
Mm.
sometimes you are the parent of the kid who is the bully. And you have to know how to spot that also. It is incumbent on a parent to look at behaviors and really start asking questions. Is my kid mean? Is my kid really that mean kid? Is she the mean girl? Is she the bully? Is she the one who's causing problems with others at school? And I just don't think that that's very difficult for parents to figure out if they're taking a look and they're asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So I know it's a lot.
No, I mean, listen, my why is a very long-winded why as well for what I do. So I get it. Like you ask me why and I'm like, buckle up for a story, okay?
Yeah, and it's true.
Yeah.
When you put so much just blood, sweat, and tears into anything and,
Mm-hmm.
developing this brand, and I'm glad. I mean, I look back and there are times when I think, oh my goodness, when I started this, had I known what I was going to go through with my daughter, would I have wanted to do it? And there were times I would say, I could have told you the answer would have been an absolute flat no way.
Mm-hmm.
No way. I can't, because I couldn't serve two masters at that time.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I look at it and I think, this is giving me insight that I didn't have before. And so that gives me somewhat of a platform maybe to talk about it in a completely different way than I would have,
Yeah.
because I approach this so differently than I would have when I started.
Mm-hmm.
So
You talked about during COVID learning all the different kinds of bread. And I know the bread making during COVID was like a big thing, but it's interesting that
huge.
you had this specific goal of these kinds of bread because I feel like I made a lot of beer bread, which I still make every now
Hmm.
and then. And my cousin made and sold beer bread even before COVID, so we had a great recipe for it already. But it's one of those things. I know my mom went through a really big focaccia learning phase, and
Oh,
like now she has this
and
sourdough
I have
starter.
focaccia.
Yeah,
I
so
have
like there's
focaccia
all
recipes here
kinds of
too.
stuff that different people did, but yours was really driven by like oh, I have this thing. Oh, I might as well just spend this time to do it now.
You know, it's funny that it didn't occur to me before. And the
Hmm.
gal who asked me this question is somebody I highly, highly respect. She has her own business. And when she said, "Why aren't you doing something with baking?" And I thought, why am I not doing anything with baking? That's kind of, and the baking side of it has been a great hook,
Hmm.
because now when I go out and talk to people, every time I set up and I'm at vendor shows or wherever it is, and I wear a hat, and I mean, I've got a hat and apron set that I put in my baking boxes. But I mean, I look the part, and of course, that draws people in because
Hmm.
so many people say, "Hey, I like to bake," and boys and girls alike really
Yeah.
enjoy baking. And I sell quite a few of my baking boxes to parents of boys, because
Hmm.
boys are really getting into baking, which I think is fabulous. And it's a life skill. I mean, it's
Yeah.
something that is going to serve both boys and girls down the road.
Hmm.
So, yes.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because
Excuse
I
me.
know you've developed your platform to be mostly targeted towards girls. Is there a reason that it couldn't be used for boys as well? I know my son, in particular, especially in like kindergarten, first, second grade. Now he's in fifth grade, about to go into sixth grade. He's got a little bit better of a handle on how to address
Mhm.
the situation, but he was really picked on about some very specific things, not only disability related, but also like his favorite color is purple and he's a boy and that's boys aren't supposed to like purple. Well, he had a purple backpack because that's his favorite color. So he went through a lot of things like that. So just curious to know. I understand why you've kind of targeted this towards girls based on your personal experience, and but is there a reason it couldn't be used for boys as well?
No, and in fact, I've been doing so over the last month, a little over. I've been conducting workshops at schools, and primarily for kindergarten, first, second grade, right about
Hmm.
there, where I have been doing a little baking. I say it's a baking presentation, but really we've been making dough because we aren't
Hmm.
cooking
Yeah,
anything at the
yeah.
school. But we're making dough together, and I've had classes that I've done this workshop where there have been more boys than girls. And I will tell them, I say, hey, all of you are going to receive a baking book. And I have my little measuring cups and spoons that work with my recipes. This is also in the baking box. And see, they're color coded and coordinated to work with the recipes. so that young bakers can figure out precise measurements.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
but I would tell these boys, I said, granted, these stories and the lessons in it, yes, you'll see the characters are girls, and the stories talk about the issues and the problems that the girls are having in their friendships. But there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't enjoy working with the recipes, reading some of the stories, and doing some of the other activities that are in the book. And the boys loved it.
Yeah.
So I will never dictate, this is only for, but
Yeah.
granted, with respect to the kinds of issues that they deal with, they are probably more in line with what girls deal with because I have girls, and the way that boys and girls communicate and bully, those differences become much, much more distinctive as they get older. By the time fifth, sixth, seventh grade, it's a completely different conversation. When they're younger, it's a little bit less so,
Yeah.
and they can probably get, they can get some of the same concepts and apply it to things that they're doing. But from just a brush problem vantage point, you actually would need a different brush to deal with the boy issues and the girls issues as they get older. So, but younger, no. And I love having boys come in and say, I like to bake. And I say, well, there are plenty of recipes in there that you can pursue, and you can wear the hat and apron or not. It's up to you, but everything else, fair game.
Yeah, I like that. And listen, turnabout's fair play, because historically a lot of books, a lot of parenting books, a lot of books that are targeted towards kids, they use, the male characters, and girls have to adapt to that. So if this is something that boys can adapt to, then that's just perfectly fine. In my opinion. I think.
Agree.
So Rose is here, and she has a great question. I do want to just point out, Rose, if you are interested in the giveaway tonight, type !chicken dinner, and that will get you into that giveaway. But Rose's question for you, Shannon, is, do you know how to crochet and or knit?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is a great question, and a kind of funny question, because I went out and purchased a knitting set because I wanted a little knitting kit. I wanted to teach myself how to knit. And I got home and I sat down and I attempted 2 or 3 times to begin knitting with this little knitting kit that I had purchased. And I got discouraged. And so my husband, who happened to be awake and watching TV, I walked in, I said, hey, can you figure out how to start this for me and show me in the morning? I said, I am exhausted. I'm going to sleep. But if you could just show me in the morning, that would be great. Well, I get up the next morning. He has already completed the project. So he is now the knitter.
I love it.
He's working on a sweater now, and actually has joined a knitting group and watches all kinds of knitting videos, and has knitted 4 or 5 different caps and is kind of expanding. And I think he's even knitted a scarf. He's a tremendous knitter, and I never did get back to it, but now I feel like it's kind of covered in our household and by my husband. So
I love that. I think that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, if it's something that he can just do and get done, and then you don't have to carry that mental load, great, awesome, wonderful.
And he loves it. So I bake, he knits, it works.
You got it covered. Well, that kind of goes into my next question, which was going to talk about, how do you balance writing and speaking and running a business and being mom and taking care of your own well-being. And it sounds like hopefully you've got a pretty equal distribution with your partner there, but how do you balance everything?
Sometimes I balance it well. Sometimes I don't. Really, and like today's a perfect example. I just got back from this conference, was going through, spent the day just poring over pages and pages of notes and things that I have to review and changes I want to make to my website. And it's just, I wear so many hats running this business. And I have wonderful people who are stepping in and working to help me. But I'm trying to build this business to where I can actually bring them into the fold. I have a great gal who her mind is always on PR things and thinks of things that I would never think of, because she's incredibly creative. And I have another gal who is working on becoming absolute killer animator. She's working on taking animation classes, and animation, and you're going to get me off on a tangent here, which I apologize, but animation is something that, and I have, granted, I do have the puppets, but when I go to these vendor fairs and vendor shows and I set up my booth, it is the easiest sell to talk to parents about what I'm doing and say, hey, these are the breadcrumbs. This is what they teach. This is what they do. I have this baking kit, blah, 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 blah. Here are my measuring cups and spoons and my hat and apron. And it's an easy sell. Now, if I could get to the point where a child recognizes my characters, that character recognition by kids would be a game changer for me.
Yeah.
So knowing that, with about a year ago, I met through the gal who does a lot of the PR for me. She happened to know her. I met this other gal who is working on developing animation and said, hey, let's start a YouTube channel. And so we did just a couple of months ago. We have over 1,000 subscribers. So we're doing well with that. That's something that we're really trying to build. And so you say, how do I maintain a balance right now? I'm not doing a good job because I'm trying to figure out how
It's hard.
try to grow this as quickly as I can, but still balance everything. And it's like the YouTube channel is going to take a lot of time and energy, and my website are going to take a lot of time and energy. And so doing those two things without having people, and that's why I'm touting both of these people, they know who they are, and maybe they're watching. Without having them helping me, I wouldn't be going right now at the rate that I am, because it's a lot. It is a lot. So I think having people around you, and yes, having my knitter husband has been great. He's a tremendous support, but there are other people who have helped fill in gaps that I never could have filled in. So that's been a great resource. And I have to give credit where credit is due. And it's definitely with them. I would have been going crazy by now without them.
Yeah.
There's just no way. But check out my YouTube channel, anyone who's watching, My Crummy World, and please subscribe. There's
Yes,
my
for
plug
sure. For
my
sure.
YouTube channel.
Yeah, I most definitely had a moment. I was trying to do everything all at once whenever I first started this podcast. Well, not when I first started this, because I started it right before COVID, and then COVID made me stop all of it anyway. So whenever I restarted it in 2023, it was kind of one of those things that I was trying to do the podcast and the live show and publishing to YouTube and doing all the social media and doing all this stuff, and I couldn't keep up with it. And so finally I was like, you know what, I'm going to cut it back. I'm going to only do the podcast part. I'll do the live, of course, the live show, because that's where all the content comes from, right? But so we'll do the live show so we can get the community engagement, get everybody asking questions and everything, and then we'll also do the podcast itself. And I did that for a full year before I tried to add anything else. And so last year is the year that I added the YouTube channel back in. And so it's like I did that for a full year successfully without missing a week. And so now I'm like, okay, I feel like those are cemented as routine. And now maybe I'll pick something else to add back.
And that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
That is, believe me, I understand that developing content consistently, it's a lot.
Yep.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So I applaud you. I know how hard that is.
It is. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. But and as well as I do, when you're passionate about something, you don't want to burn out on it, because you'll get to that point and you'll be like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Oh, but this is what I'm driven to do. And so you got to pick.
Yeah.
You got to pick where you can find that balance. You got to pick and choose a little bit, for sure.
Exactly.
Rose says, not a question, but in my opinion, crochet is easier. So good on him for learning to knit. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I can't wait to tell him. He's going to be so excited to know that he came up. He and his knitting came up in this conversation.
Yeah, that's great. He's getting some airtime without even being here.
Yes. Well, and it's funny because our kids said there have been discussion about that he should start his own YouTube channel where he just knits quietly and he doesn't talk. And I said, the funny thing is, he could probably do that and develop a huge following just sitting and knitting quietly to like light jazz music without ever having to do or say anything else,
Yeah.
Because that's how things go. And meanwhile, I am trying to create content for the next, stories and yeah, don't get me.
Yep. Well, this next question is not really related to the topic, but it's one that we talk about a lot on this channel because it seems to just come up. So, do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
So, I do. And I am not a true crime junkie, but I did get drawn into last year. It's called American Nightmare. And it was the story of, I believe, the gal was called the real life Gone Girl. She was
Mm.
dubbed that. And I remember and Nancy Grace would just skewer this poor girl, this couple. She was kidnapped. She was bound and gagged, and he put duct tape goggles on her.
Oh, no.
And the whole thing was so bizarre. And there's like a 4-part series on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and it was last year that it was on. And it sounds so crazy. And of course, the husband is immediately the main suspect
Yeah.
because he's telling this totally bizarre story. And I mean, as you watch it, and of course, I got sucked in. I'm like, oh, it was definitely him. He did it. He did it. He did it. And then all of a sudden, she's returned.
Mm.
The kidnapper drops her off, which makes the whole thing seem even more phony. And so they start, and they're interrogating both of them, and they're interrogating them separately to see if their stories line up. And it's not until a female detective in this little town in California, she listens to the way they describe the whole scenario, and she hears similarities between that particular abduction and another completely separate abduction.
Oh, wow.
And so she starts diving in and finding clues, and she's the one who she found, like, she ends up finding some evidence with, I think, duct tape or something with a blonde hair that matches at a completely different. I mean, she pieces it together and blows the whole thing open, and all of a sudden they realize that this couple, they were telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mind blowing. It's so watching, and again, it's a very short 4-part. It's a pretty quick watch, but it's so intriguing because you kind of get sucked into this. There's no way this is real,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting. And it's called American Nightmare. And in fact, I watched it. Made my husband watch it too.
Yeah.
It's really good, really, really good.
I don't remember watching that one. We watch a lot of like the little docu-series that come out. The latest one is that we've been watching is the Ruby Frankie one, which is an awful story, and it's just wild how things can go from, okay, maybe you're not the best parent in the world, to holy shit, you are off your rocker. Like it just goes wild. I don't remember watching American Nightmare, so I'll have to go back and see. My 18-year-old loves those kinds of things as well, so we'll sit down and watch them sometimes, and he'll have them on in the other room and stuff while I'm working, and we'll have to go back and look at that one for sure. It looks like it's still on Netflix, so
it's really good. It's really good.
yeah.
Anyway.
Rose says, I love the Gainesville Ripper story. It's a story behind Scream. Oh, interesting. I don't know if I've heard of that one. I'll have to look that one up because that one's not familiar to me. I didn't realize Scream was like a real thing. Tyrion is interrupting. Boy, he's like, pay attention to me. You're a good cat. You really are. He's here. He's like, you need to stop talking about this story.
Yeah, he is. He really is. He will not be ignored.
No, he will not. No, he definitely does not want to be ignored. And he just wants me to pet him. That's all he wants. So getting back to the topic for the night, from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that kids with disabilities face in school today?
Oh my goodness. The list of this with challenges for kids in schools is long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from insufficient funding, inadequate accommodations, teachers, not enough teachers, not the right kinds of teachers. But I think when I look at this and I think about it, I really feel like the biggest challenge that's faced by a lot of these kids, and I speak specifically to my own, is that they're not seen. They really are
Mm.
not seen or understood. And nobody, we live in a world that is running on, I say, it's not even scan radio attention span anymore. See, if you remember, I know I'm dating myself, but scan radio at least
Uh-huh.
would go through and stop. And you would be stopped on a station for a good maybe 5 seconds, seven
Yep.
seconds. We have blown past. Now it's not scan radio attention span anymore. It is now it's these kids scroll so fast through things that if you can't capture someone's attention so quickly
Mm-hmm.
and really communicate something to them so clearly and so precisely, so quickly, they will not give you enough time to make your point or to at least validate your feelings. So I feel like kids face so many more challenges in this short attention span society that we live in, trying to be heard and be understood and articulate what it is that they need from the people around them. And I watched this with my daughter as she slowly understood what it was that, her own affliction. And it was hard for her in the beginning to even understand what was going on with her body and how to respond to it and how to take care of herself. But then she had to articulate that to everybody else around her.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that when you have an inability to understand what's going on with you? How do you effectively communicate that to someone else? And is that her responsibility? Is that her job? It frustrates me because that's really where you need to have the kinds of adult figures who can intervene and who can help kind of teach that. But again, then you get into that's teaching empathy, and
Mm-hmm.
that's social and emotional learning. And I don't know. I feel like we're going in a direction where I don't even know how much of this in the future will. So I feel sad for the direction that a lot of this is going, because I think kids who were at a disadvantage before are at a much greater disadvantage now.
Yeah.
So that's where parents have to really step up and speak out and fight for the things that your kids need. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't advocate for your kids, nobody else will.
Yeah.
So,
It's very true. And I know that teachers absolutely want the best for their kids. I have loved every teacher that my youngest has had, especially given his issues that started even before kindergarten. And it's one of those things that they do want the best for your kid. They're going to do the best for your kids as they can. You still have to be there. You still have to be there and talking
absolutely.
to those teachers, because we had an incident. He has a 504 plan and everything. I didn't realize his 504 plan was not being followed until there was an incident. And when there was an
Mhm.
incident, I said, well, why was he in that situation to begin with? He's supposed to be in a specific place in the classroom. He's supposed to have specific things he can do. And he was put in the back. And it's like, okay, well, I understand the issue is a problem. And yes, we are going to address it with him. However, you also weren't following the plan that
Yep.
was in place. And why is that? And I realized at that point, it was just a couple of months into the school year. And I realized, oh, we didn't have a review. I spoke with his teacher. I spoke with his teacher at the beginning of the year and kind of explained some things. We didn't actually sit down and review his plan. They didn't set up the
Mhm.
review until November. And it was like, that's so many months into the school year. And I just realized, this is one of those years that I really should have called the school and set something up immediately whenever the school started. And I know that that's hard on timing for teachers and everything. But yeah, if you're not there and making sure that things are
Yep.
going the way that they need to be going, and then something happens, sure, you can react to it. Sure, you can get involved then. But I felt like it was a little bit on me to have contacted the school and said, hey, can I meet with the coordinator and also with the teachers that my son is seeing? And we can talk through his 504
Right.
plan, make sure that everything's going well in the classroom and everything. But yeah, you have to be the one monitoring
You
that,
do. You do.
checking in
And
on it. Even if
yeah.
it's in place, you are still the one
Yeah.
who has to be like, is this being followed? Because the teachers can't keep
Yep.
up with every piece of paper that the school administrators have. They just can't.
Agreed.
And they don't get paid
Agreed.
enough to
I
either.
agree. I know. I know. No, you're exactly right. And I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on this some more as we go through some of these other questions. But yeah, that's parents. You learn this, especially as your kids, if they suffer from any kind of medical condition, I mean, we had to do this even just working through the medical community. If you suspect something's going on with your child, you have to advocate.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have found out what was going on with her unless we pushed. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, our pediatrician kind of brushed it off. We said, no, this is not usual. This is unusual for this is something that's different. This goes above. This is not just, typical teenage girl anxiety. There's
Mm-hmm.
more going on. We had to push to get her seen by a specialist. We had to push. It's the same thing. You have to kind of take the gears and you have to control and you have to push and you have to advocate, especially if you know something's wrong with
Mm-hmm.
your kid, whether it's in the medical setting or in the school setting.
Yeah.
Same rules apply.
It's funny you say that because I had totally forgotten, but I had to do the same thing with our pediatrician
Mm-hmm.
because my ex and I were separating and he didn't believe that anything was physically wrong with our kid and he was punishing for certain behaviors. And I was like, hey, he doesn't have control over that. Like, that's not actually something that he can control. And I went to see the pediatrician. I was like, hey, these are the things. And he was like, oh, that's just typical developmental. I was like, okay, that's your opinion. I want a second opinion. Please give us a referral to a neurologist. We went into the neurologist's office. We sat down in there with the neurologist. And within like 5 minutes, the neurologist was like, yeah, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to be like, great, thanks for your opinion. You are not the end all be all. I would like to see someone else, please. And it can be
Exactly.
really hard. It can be really scary. And sometimes I'm very fortunate that I was able to take the time off to go and do that. And yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like sometimes not everyone is going to be on your side immediately, and you do have to do a little bit of fighting for it.
Exactly.
Which is tough.
Yep.
What are some common misconceptions about children with disabilities in school settings?
I think a lot of it really centers around the fact that I think there are some parents who think that kids with disabilities don't learn at the same rate, that there's something, I think that's comes from this whole misconception that disabilities are something that you can see. And a lot of times disabilities are invisible.
Yeah.
I know with our daughter, her disability is completely invisible, and same holds for ADHD, dyslexia, forms of anxiety. If you can't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem. And our poor kid had to go back to school. She went back to school in 7th grade after we finally got her to the point through medication and whatnot. We were able to keep her upright. She was fainting.
Oh,
And of
wow.
course the school, because she was fainting and we didn't know when she was going to faint, because it's a whole, she has a form of dysautonomia. So her autonomic nervous system doesn't function properly. When she would stand up, the blood would pool in her legs. She could not pump the blood effectively, I say northward. And so her heart would overcompensate and start beating real fast, and she would get lightheaded and down she would go. And it took a combination of medication and salt water. And, whereas most people are supposed to kind of stay away from too much salt, she could not get too much salt. She needed salt to help give her a spike in her blood pressure. So until we figured all of that out, we had to keep her out of school because the school didn't want her there if she was a
Yeah.
fainting risk because of liability. So she ended up being out of school for 3 months. And when she finally got to go back, after getting her off of our hospital homebound, which that was old. And again, I could talk about things that you need to learn. And boy, when they're just kind of thrust upon you, you learn fast. But she was so excited to go back to school. And I remember it was like Christmas. She got to go back and see her friends. And she gets 7th grade, and she was greeted by some girls in her class who said to her, "What's wrong with you? You don't look sick." Were you faking it? Did you make this up? Did you need attention? What? It just, it's like, she was excited to just get back to some form of normal.
right.
And this is what she went back to. And again, that's where you really want to say, okay, if these kids can't walk in the shoes of somebody else for even, 10 minutes and say, let me just try to understand. Let me be curious about this rather than judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem that needs to be addressed, not just at school, but at home. And that's something I just don't understand. And this continued until I got a call from one of her teachers. She was back in school and things were going well. And I got a call from her teacher who said, is everything going okay with your daughter? And I said, why would you ask? She's been at school, knock on wood, things have been going. And she said, because there's a rumor circulating that she drank bleach.
Uh,
And I said, okay. Of course, I had to march right back out of school
yeah.
and say, okay, we need to have a discussion
Mm-hmm.
about the kinds of conversations that are taking place in the school and why, and shut this down, shut it down. And the teachers were very receptive. And I tell you, the school, that particular school, her middle school that she went to, the administration, the teachers, they were fantastic. The principal there at the time, when we sat down in this room full of teachers and administrators working out her 504, and he, at the time, this particular principal knew how difficult this whole situation was. He said, what can we do to help you? What can we do? And I said, well, she really feels like she doesn't have community, that she's
Yeah.
missing her friends. She's at home, she's isolated. And he said, well, any days that she feels good enough to be up and around, even if it's 30 minutes to an hour, bring her to school and you just let her wander in and out of
Mm-hmm.
classrooms. And he said, if any teacher gives you pushback, you tell them to come see me. And it made me cry because
Yeah.
he said, I want to do everything I can to help maintain this
Mm-hmm.
community for her so that she doesn't feel like she's disconnected. And that was fantastic. And that, those kinds of things, that's going above and beyond. And those kinds of teachers and administrators are out there and they're wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I can't say enough good things about. But Lord knows we had a lot of
Yeah.
difficulty with others, So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are
anyway,
definitely there are some educators who are going to be super on your side. They're going to be super helpful. They're going to be super in your corner. There are some who aren't going to get it. And
yes,
it's down to what
we
kind
have
of
those too.
person they are. And I'm
Yeah.
very glad that y'all were fortunate enough to have someone that supportive in that environment. I think that that's wonderful. I know that not everyone has that. I have been very fortunate with our schools that we have that I have both of my kids going to. They've been very helpful. They've been very willing to work with whatever we need to work with. And whenever I moved here, I've told the story a couple of times. Whenever I moved here, I reached out to the different school districts and said, like, hey, how do you handle kids with these particular things? How do you handle kids with these particular things? What about this type of situation? And a couple of the school districts in this area, I live in Texas, responded and said, like,
Hmm.
we do the state required bare minimum. And I'm like, cool, we're not going there. And
Exactly.
but not everyone has the ability to say, I'm
Yeah,
going to choose
that's
not to
true.
live in that school district. Not everyone has the ability to say that. I was very
Yeah.
fortunate that I was already going to be moving back to this area, and I was able to just call my realtor and be like, knock these school districts off. We're not going anywhere with there. I don't care
Yeah.
how good of a deal it is. So,
No.
it sometimes you can find the really good people in there who can help kind of advocate for that. I love what you said about the
Yeah. And you have to look.
curiosity piece too. Just that bit of, I wish that other students would be a little bit curious. There's a great scene in a show called Ted Lasso, and if anyone has not seen Ted Lasso, highly, highly, highly recommend. There is a scene in there where Ted Lasso is a coach. He goes into a bar. He's challenged to a game of darts, and he gets down to the very last, and he's like, "How many do I need to win?" And everyone's like, "Oh, you need, whatever." And he goes, I was bullied as a kid and I never did understand that it wasn't ever about me. It was about the other person. If they'd been curious to know a little bit more about me, they would understand me better. But it was never on me to do that. It was never on me to be that curious person in response to that. I am a curious person. And if, he goes on to say, like, if you had been curious, you would have asked me, have you ever played darts before? Like, it's a beautiful scene. I'll have to find a link
Beautiful. Yes.
specifically to that one because it's
I know, and I know
wonderful.
the exact scene, and I
Yes,
love that. I
it's so
love
good.
the lessons that were embedded in so many of those shows that did.
Yes.
I know the writers did a
Yes.
fantastic job with that series. It's one of my favorites. It's my
Yes.
husband's absolute favorite of all series.
It's
So yes.
wonderful. It was recommended to me several times, especially by my baby sister. And she recommended it a couple of times, and then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna watch a couple. And whenever she recommended it to me, I'm a crier. So she was like, you will need tissues every episode. You will need tissues, which is maybe why I didn't watch it right away.
Yeah,
But then I started watching it and I'm like, this is so good. Highly,
it
highly
is. It
recommend.
really
Highly
is.
recommend. But specifically that one, it's like just be a little bit curious. Be a little bit curious. Ask a
Mhm.
couple basic questions.
Questions.
And, little
So true.
kids, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but little kids are much more willing to do things like that, to do things like ask questions.
Yes.
Why are you doing those movements? Why are you making those noises? Why are you fainting? Just even asking, like, hey, what's
Yeah.
going on? Those are questions that sometimes you get older and your anxiety gets in the way, or you feel like you're going to be offensive if you ask those kinds of
Yeah.
questions. And it can be really difficult, but yeah, get a little curious for sure.
Agreed.
How can storytelling and creative activities like baking, how can those help children build confidence and friendships?
Well, so with my characters, I have had the luxury, and I tell you, I'm going to grab one. So when I go out and I work with young kids, and I've taken these out to like the Boys and Girls Club, and I've worked with, and I will start off by saying, okay, tell me a time when one of your friends did, and I'll give them some kind of scenario, that I said that something might have hurt your feelings, or maybe there was misunderstanding, or maybe one of your friends made you angry. And these girls would sit and I would say, can you share one of these kinds of situations with me? And they would all kind of look at each other and no, I can't think of anything. And really? And then I would get my puppets out and we would start going through some of the scenarios with the puppets where all of a sudden the emphasis wasn't on any one particular person in the room, but these were just stories. It was all
Mm-hmm.
fictitious that dealt with the puppets. And then I would talk about how one of the puppets would upset one of the others or hurt one of the others' feelings or something would happen. And now once the entire story has moved from reality to storytelling, now all of a sudden it's fair game. And these same girls start sharing all kinds of information with me because it's a totally different
Mm-hmm.
scenario. And it just, I mean, it was incredible. I remember the first time this happened, I thought, this is where they overcome the fear of expressing what's happening and what's going on with them because we're getting into a realm that's a lot more creative and a lot less threatening.
Mm.
And I realized this is kind of the gateway to getting kids to share. And so I take these puppets out and I'm working on, I wish so much that I had smaller versions because I looked into a lot of, because the kids always love the puppets. And this is why I use the puppets on my YouTube channel. And we do some things with the puppets. And I've taken them out to schools. And the minute I put them on my hands, it's almost like I disappear and
Uh-huh.
the kids see only the puppets. It's incredible. It's just kids and imagination and creativity. It's limitless. And so when I use them, and that's why when I talk to parents about this, I try to really emphasize, get into the stories, take the emphasis off of your kids, start talking about the stories with the puppets if you need to, in ways that are a lot less threatening and a lot less personal to your own kids, and see if they don't relate some of their own experiences with you. I
Mm.
think that's like this portal that you can enter and you can find out all kinds of things with your kids as long as you're talking about it in
Mm-hmm.
a completely different way. It's like I when I talk to these kids at school, I say, well, we're talking about a problem that Whitney has. I mean, I'm sure none of you have this problem, but Whitney sure does. And it's funny because then they'll say, well, sometimes it happens with me too. Really? Because
Yeah.
when I asked you directly, you
You're
said
right.
no, but now, so, this, when you talk about, see, I love using storytelling and using any kind of means like this
Mm.
to try to get kids to express themselves more. And that's the beauty of using the breadcrumbs, and even the analogy of they're leaving a trail that girls can follow. It's kind of taking yourself out of your own life and saying, okay, if we're going to look at the path that you're going to take. We can talk about the mistakes that the breadcrumbs have made along their path, and maybe we can relate it to your path, and maybe there are some pitfalls that you can avoid and
Mm.
obstacles and things because we've seen what's happened with them. And then just kind of apply things. And I love using all of these kinds of metaphors and analogies with kids because I think it kind of takes them out of their own reality, and it makes
Mm.
them so much more willing to share, because kids love creativity and expression and storytelling. They love it. That's a world that they really need to be in more. They need to be out
Mhm.
of their own reality so much more. And I mean, this gets me into, okay, if I'm going to promote any book on this, there is a book that I promote to parents more than any other. In fact, at this conference that I just left, somebody asked me point blank, as a parent with kids who are grown, if you were to recommend a book to me, and I mean, besides The Little Girls Can Be Mean, which is a very good book, I recommend The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. Parents with kids need to read this book. He talks about what's happening with our kids as we have moved from what he calls a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood,
Mm.
and what it's doing to our kids. We need kids need play.
Yeah.
They need play with their peers. They need that feedback. They need their a group of their own aged peers, and sometimes even just slightly older, are going to do more in terms of giving them feedback about the way they handle themselves, how to negotiate things, how to play fairly, really what the limits are in terms of their behavior. They will learn more from just play with their peers than they will learn anywhere. And they will not learn this being tied to their phones or iPads and playing games, or just stuck in their rooms, really not exploring the whole world of play.
Mm.
And so I highly recommend that book.
Yeah, that
Highly, highly, highly
I
recommend that
just
book.
posted a link to it so if anybody's looking for it, and I'm also going to add it to my want to read as well. Of course,
Oh, it
one of
is
my
a
kids is
must
grown, but
read.
the other one's only 11, so
But it's still, there's so much good info.
yeah.
And especially if you have a child who is 11, it's definitely a good time to read it, because it gets, and he talks very, very specifically and very pointedly about where the routes that both boys and girls take
Mm.
as they grow, and the challenges that await them. We're raising a generation of girls who are more anxious, more depressed,
Mm.
and highest suicide rates ever. Not in the last decade, not in the last, literally ever. And he really breaks down why this is happening and what girls are looking for, why they aren't finding it. And he's talking about growing a generation of boys who are completely and socially inept
Mm.
because they are not learning how to communicate effectively and develop the kinds of relationships they need, not just with boys, but with girls. And we are looking at a world that could potentially lead to where they never have to interact with another person because they can create their own artificially intelligence generated friend or girlfriend.
Mhm.
I mean, that's where we're going. And parents have got to put the brakes on this with these kids
Yeah.
because they need actual interaction. So
Yeah.
that's my soapbox.
Hey, hop on it. That's what we're here
Really,
for.
it's a very, very good book, and I will always recommend it.
Okay.
So
Well, it sounds like a great one. I mean, you're definitely recommending it in a way that I'm like, okay, I got to read that one.
it's good. It's really good.
What role does emotional intelligence play in creating inclusive school environments?
So emotional intelligence. I this is one where I really feel like the key with kids, and I touched on this when discussing my daughter and her friend,
Hmm.
and that is empathy, 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 empathy. That is such a hard concept to teach kids. And I was looking back trying to think how we can do that with kids that would actually be meaningful to them. And I know there have been other experiments that have done in the past, and this I'm sure I'm totally dating myself, but there was a gal named Jane Elliott who back in 1968, she did this experiment where she had a classroom, and it was just a classroom with, I think it was all white kids, but she separated them. I think between the two in her class, she divided and separated with two different groups, blue-eyed kids and brown-eyed kids.
Oh, I've heard of
And
this. Yes.
it is fascinating
Yep.
because what she did was she then said, okay, for the next day or 2 days, the brown-eyed kids are superior and the blue-eyed kids are inferior. And she treated them in such a way that she would give preferential treatment to the brown-eyed kids, but not to the blue-eyed kids. And the brown-eyed kids got to go to recess and they got to stay out longer and they got to eat lunch sooner. And then she flipped it. And she did the same for the blue-eyed kids, not the brown-eyed kids. And these kids, they it was interesting because the kids who were a part of the inferior group slowly just started breaking down. They were performing worse on the academic work. They were developing so much animosity to the other group. And it was a real, very strong example of how discrimination plays out and how it
Hmm.
works and how it makes you feel. And that was such a great example. And granted, I mean, it was so groundbreaking at that time that she did this in 1968. And I know Frontline has actually replayed this on PBS, and they did it, gosh, 20, 30 years ago. There's a Frontline special, and I can't remember what it's called. I'll think of it. But they actually showed what she did. And to me, that is just to have a teacher actually figure out a way. And I know, so when I was in high school, there was it was an extracurricular, it was like a summer thing that kids were selected. They set up this place, it was called Anytown. And they did something similar. I didn't attend it, but I had friends who did. And what they did was they distributed t-shirts of a certain color. And so at the beginning, the kids didn't understand why these kids got a red shirt, these kids got a yellow shirt, these kids got a blue shirt. And they did the same kind of thing. They said, okay, if you have a red shirt, you get to eat first. And if you have a red shirt, you get to go pick whatever, the rooms that you're going to stay in. And the other ones were saying, well, wait a minute. And with no explanation, they just started treating the groups differently.
Hmm.
And I talked to some of the kids who went to Anytown and said, what was it like? And they said, oh my goodness, it absolutely broke you down. I mean, these kids, they
Yeah.
said there were times kids were sobbing and they were, I mean, just taking it out on one another. And there was so much fighting and, it's not like physical fighting, but they just had so many conflicts that emerged immediately because of the lack of
Hmm.
understanding. And it was just such a great depiction of the kinds of things that people face in our society. And I think if we can find creative ways to really demonstrate and let kids figure out some form of empathy that would translate, it's like
Hmm.
anything that just says they don't choose, kids aren't choosing to have certain disabilities. They don't choose this. They just have them. And if there's a way that we can teach kids to be more empathetic about that, I want to find that, I want to
Yeah.
get there. And granted, I think it would take a certain level of creativity with teachers and maybe some courage, but I really think it could be meaningful for kids. And so I try with my stories and in my books and in the activities, I really try to create discussions and things with the kids where you can say, hey, have you thought about looking at this from the other person's vantage point, or
Mm,
how she would feel and what she would. And I think those are good conversations that parents can start having. But I really feel like if we want kids to get it, we need to go even further than that and find ways that we can do it where kids can just get some basic understanding of one another and be more curious and
yeah.
ask more questions,
Yeah.
you know just kind of unlocking that door of curiosity, like, why does
Hmm.
she faint? How does she feel when she faints? How does she is she embarrassed? You know, are there things she can do to keep her from fainting? Does she try to do those things?
Hmm.
I mean, just start asking more questions.
Yeah.
And again, we're looking at teachers who don't have the time or the resources.
Yeah.
I know there are so many challenges, but emotional intelligence it's a hard thing to get to, but I think there are ways. But we cannot do this by absolutely eliminating social and emotional learning. I think we have to keep that in our schools.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if we will be able to. I
Keeps
think a lot of
being
that's going to be.
legislated out, unfortunately. That's such a bummer.
Yep.
Kim
Yep.
Kim Stephenson is here in the chat, and they said there used to be a program called More Alike Than Different. It simulates the effects of different disabilities. And these kind of the examples of Jane Elliott and the Anytown. There's a great video out there. I'll have to find it because I don't know offhand who did it, but it's this guy has these kids line up in a line just all next to each other, and he says things like, take 2 steps forward if your parents are still married. Take a step
Yes,
forward
I've
if you've
seen
never
that.
had to wonder if you were going to have lunch today. And it's like
Yeah.
now the race starts, and you see the video that I saw, like some of the kids are crying because they're like, I
Yeah.
haven't taken any steps forward. And then whenever they say, okay, now go, those kids at the back are still running just as hard as the other kids. And some of the
Yeah.
kids in the front are like, I'm not even going to try. This is awful. So those kinds of things, like, it really, but if you've never thought of it that way, if you've never thought about that
I
from a
know.
perspective of what if I was in that position? What if that was me in that
Yeah.
position? And it just
Exactly.
goes back to that curiosity. Ask. Just ask the question.
Ask. I know. And I love anyone who steps out, and thank you, Kim, for that.
Hmm.
I love anyone who steps outside of just the regular, you know, black and white of it. Here's, this is what we have in print. This is what we know, but actually moves into some of this gray area where maybe kids can ask more questions and kind of feel out a little bit more emotionally of what others experience. I love examples like that. I
Yeah.
think it really pushes kids to think more about
Yeah.
what's happening. So
Yep. It really
love that.
does. I know we talked about parents, or not parents, but well, I mean parents too, but teachers being stretched thin, for sure. But is there a way for parents and teachers to work together to support kids with disabilities and encourage their classmates to be more understanding?
Yeah, we touched on this before. I 100% have to tell parents this is one area where you have to find out everything that you need to know. You need to know what an IEP is. You have to know these things. You
Yeah.
need to know who to talk to about developing an IEP, and that stands for an individualized educational program. I always refer to it as an individualized educational plan. And you need to know that these IEPs cover different things, and you can actually specify what you
Hmm.
want it to cover with your child. If your child has a difficult time socializing, you can actually specify, I want him or her to have more socialization time. I mean, you can be very specific. You have to find out what it is, how to get one, who to talk to, and how often it needs to be reviewed, and revised,
Yeah.
and stay up with it. You need to know about a 504. And a 504 is different than an IEP. A 504 actually provides accommodations if your child needs it. You have to know what these things are. And a lot of parents may not know that their child does qualify for an IEP or a 504. If your child is gifted, they need an IEP. There's so many things that parents don't understand. And I get it. I hate the whole I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm a victim of I don't know what I don't know. But that's why you have to start asking questions.
Yeah.
It's absolutely imperative to start asking questions if you think your child needs some kind of help. And I say that IEPs and 504s should not have a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents think of that and think that's special education. Well, sure, it's special education. Special education encompasses a wide range of things. And special education teachers are tremendous, tremendous assets. So we need to just make sure that parents understand that and that you start working more with your schools. Now, the other thing that's missing in all of this, and I have to harp on it a little bit because I was very active in PTA when my kids were young. PTAs are suffering. Parents are not getting involved. Parents should be involved in their kids' school as much as they can be. And I know times are tough and parents are working, both parents are working much more than ever before. There are more two-parent households. I get all of that. I know. But if there are ways that you can still find some kind of connection to your child's school, whether it be once or twice a month, that you can check in and you can do things and your kid sees you as a part of that school and being involved in school, it will do wonders for your child and for that school. Because if you're visible and the teachers see you and the administration sees you, I promise your kid's going to have a better experience at school because the teachers and the administrators know that you are dialed in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's like a 12-prong approach. You really just need to make sure you're hitting on all the cylinders. You do. I mean, when you have a kid in school, you have a really good opportunity to make sure they have the best possible experience. And it doesn't require being all in. You can pick and choose just as long as you're there and you're visible and you're dialed in enough that the parents know. I mean, the teachers know that you're a parent who's dialed in. So that's I know. It's, I had parents that both of whom worked a lot when I was growing up. And I think about it's one of the few things that gets me very, very teary-eyed when I think about it. No matter what it was, if it was a softball game 3 hours away at a school that was out in the middle of nowhere, play, or regardless, my parents showed up to everything. They both worked. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked for General Motors. They both worked very long schedules. They always made it to every single event. I begged them because there were times when they were the only parents that would show up for games. And I would say, you don't have to go. No other parents are going. They would still go. They would always go. And my friends were like, your parents are here. Yeah. And I look back on that now and I think, that left such a huge, huge impression on me as I became a parent because I thought, they were able to do this with their busy schedules. They were always able to be there, always. So I just think it's so important to show up for your kids.
Yeah.
Got to do it.
And I do know that it's tough. I am a single mom. The other parent really is not involved in any of the day-to-day.
Yes.
Really doesn't show up for very much. And for that, honestly, I am personally thankful. But that's a whole other story. But yeah, like I know that it is really, really hard. And it is harder for some people than it is for other people. It's harder for some people than it is for me to make sure that I am there, to make sure that I am talking to everything. Like I don't go to PTA meetings. I don't have the time generally. I'm having to call in help all the time to be like, hey, that on this Thursday, my youngest has jujitsu and I have to go to a meeting at the junior high because he's being put into some sort of advanced class and they want to talk about it. And so I'm like, okay, I need someone to take him to jujitsu so that I can go to this thing over here. Cause it's just me. Unfortunately, My 18-year-old
Yep.
can drive. My sister lives nearby. My dad is retired. He lives nearby. Like I've got support and I've got help. But it's a matter of just asking and making sure that I am everywhere
Absolutely.
all at once in some way, shape, or
I
form.
know.
But it's hard.
No.
It's
And
hard.
I tell you, and there's no doubt about it. And I know I've talked to so many. I can say that while I have not had to go it alone, and in terms of single parenting, being married to somebody who's former military, we've been through deployments. So I've had
Hmm.
periods of single parenting. And I know you go into survival mode. I mean,
Yeah.
you get to the point where you're like, hey, if these kids are alive at the end of the day, I've done my job.
Yeah.
I mean, anything above and beyond that, no.
Yep.
So I get it. I get that. But I tell you, I have met a lot of single parents who still they are very choosy about where they spend their time,
Hmm.
and they make sure they inject just enough of it in the right places
Yes.
so that they're seen. They're seen at the right time and they're heard at the right time.
Yeah.
And again, you're right. You have to pick and choose very wisely.
Yeah. You
But
really do.
and but again, I mean, none of that has stopped you from advocating for your kids
Yeah.
every step of the way in the best way that you can.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Most definitely. Most definitely.
yeah.
Every time I do sometimes have to travel for work. Every time my dad will come and stay with the kids and yeah, I print out the schedule for him. I email him the schedule. I put everything. And every time I come back, he's just like, I still don't understand how you do this all the time, every day. And I'm like, you just
Mhm.
do it. You just do it. You just one
You
foot
do.
in front of the other and you just do it. And then looking back, it doesn't even seem like a lot to me right now. But
Yeah.
writing, every time I have to write it all out for him, I'm like, holy shit.
But how great to have extended family around you.
Yeah.
That's one
Yeah.
thing I
Most
have
definitely.
always been envious of because we were a military family. I have never lived close to family. And
Mm,
I've never had the parent close by that I could drop my
yeah.
kids off with. I've never had that, and that's something I always wanted. I
It's
always
the
wished I
reason I moved back
so.
here. That's the reason that I moved back
And I
here.
think, yeah,
And to
yeah,
help care for my grandmother also. But
love grandparents,
yeah.
love them.
Couple of comments from Kim that I want to make sure to read from the chat. Librarians can be a great resource. Books that introduce
Yeah,
disabilities and teach empathy. Absolutely. Librarians are your friend.
here, here,
Go talk to
absolutely.
them.
I
Yes.
agree. That
Yes.
is good point, Kim. That is a great point. And yes, she's exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right.
I love this also. Read with your kids and see if they react with empathy. If they don't, stop and talk about it. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Get a story
That's
that,
and that again, that is a great way to when you're reading with your kids, that's demonstrating that when you're
mhm.
reading, actually be and I know some nights I get it. Some nights you're just like, I'm reading the story as fast as I can. I'm going to bed. I'm tired. I feel like we're going to get through the
Yep.
story. But if you can, I think that's a great way to gauge
Hmm.
if they are understanding and developing some sense of empathy. I agree with that. I
Yeah.
think that's a wonderful way to gauge it with your kids. And that's when you can start looking for.
Hmm.
And if your kid has no empathy and should be showing some empathy, that's a time to start having a conversation,
Yeah.
about, does this make you feel a certain way?
Hmm.
Really? Let's dive a little more into that
Yeah.
because those are questions you should be definitely asking.
Also, as your kids get older, like my 11-year-old, I don't read with him anymore. He reads on his own. But
Right.
as they get older, I ask him questions. Hey, what's happening in the book that you're reading right now? And he'll talk about stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. Is that your favorite character? All this stuff. And then every now and then there will be a death in a book that he's reading, and he'll be really upset. And I'll be like, you know what? I cry over
Hmm.
books all the time. It's okay. We can cry. We can
See,
cry
so
over
you're,
books. All good.
you are, but you're essentially you're having that
Yes.
conversation though.
Yep.
You're having that same
Yeah.
kind of conversation.
Yeah.
It's just it's you're doing it differently because of his age, but that's a great conversation to have.
Yep. And then that's the way teachers are when they're sick, writing the sub plans out. Yeah. Yes. So my
Oh
oldest,
yeah.
my
Oh.
oldest, he's a senior in high school, but he's in a work study program. He wants to be a teacher. And so he goes to an elementary school twice a week during the school day and helps
Mhm.
out one of the teachers there with her classroom. And not long ago, he was like, "Oh, I don't remember what we did on this specific date. And I was supposed to write it down. I didn't write it down." I was like, "Email your teacher. I'll bet she has the plan. Like, I'll bet she has the plan written down for that day. I'll bet she can just find it." And then also ask to see, like, what do her plans look like? Because it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a
Oh,
lot.
yeah. 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 Without a doubt.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely. So, what advice do you have for parents who struggle with social inclusion at school specifically? I know that's something that you struggled with your daughter. So, how can parents address that a little bit?
So there are, and it's a difficult one. I know that I mentioned if your kids are younger, that's an area where you can actually incorporate this. If you have, like I said, an IEP, this is an area where you can kind of incorporate it into their IEP so that there's going to be more discussion and more emphasis and more observation of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this really is where you have to feel like you have that kind of relationship with the instructor, the teacher, their other administrators, the guidance counselor at the school to have these kinds of conversations. And they're not going to be easy to have all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's tough. It could because that's something that you'll be able to do more about when they're younger, because I think you can actually take a more active role. As they get older, a lot of times you aren't going to be able to see it as much, and they aren't going to talk to you about it nearly as much. And that's why it's so much better to try to utilize the resources that you have available to you when they're young. But what I do with the reason that I have my brand and try to work with parents and grandparents, because you brought it up with your dad, is trying to create the kind of relationship with your little one so that they will come to you and bring these things to you. I think if you start having these conversations when they're younger and they learn that they can bring you the small stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I love telling parents, and I tell you, I feel kind of bad because one night I literally had to just cut, my husband off before he said, our daughter came in, she second or third grade, and she came trotting into our room, and it was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And we go to bed really early around, my husband and I, we've always been to bed early. That's just who we are. But I heard her up and she was coming in and said, Mom, you're never going to believe what, so-and-so said to me or what happened at school today. And my husband started to say, honey, it's, after your bedtime, you need to be in bed. I knew that's what he was like.
Yep.
No, we're going to sleep. Don't bring this in here. And I had to say, shh, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. This is something that's keeping her up. She's not sleeping because this is on her mind. She wants to talk about it. I want her to talk about it. And so she came over and I said, what's going on? Tell me. And I feel like it's so important as parents, if we teach our kids from a young age that they can bring us the little
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and that, in her mind, at that time, she didn't think this was too huge, but it was still bugging her. If they come to you with the little stuff and you don't dismiss them, they'll come to you with the big stuff. And that's something that you slowly build up as you go along. And that's that trust relationship. And I really believe that this kind of helps them as they get older if they are feeling more isolated at school, and they're going to feel like they can still bring that kind of stuff to you. I will never forget riding home. We had put our daughter after she kind of got integrated back into middle school, and we were worried about her, really people paying attention to her disability and teachers watching over her. And we put her first year into a private school because we're 504. It was easy for us to do because we got funding that we could put toward this. It was wonderful. So we thought, we're going to stick her in a private school. This will be great. But we'd pulled her away from her regular group of friends and put her in this other school where we thought she was going to be protected. And we were maybe 2 months into school, and I'm driving her home, and very quickly she turned to me. As I said to her, how was school today? And she said, I have isolated. And I tell you, and I thought, oh my goodness, we picked the right school for us. We didn't pick the right school for her.
Yeah.
And so we got her out of that school and back to a school where we may not have had as much control over the administration and, but she was among her friends, and that at that point was where she needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I'm grateful that she told us, but I tell you, that was one of those not happy we
Yeah.
made. But again, you do the best with what you have at the time, you know? But that's a perfect example of we thought we were really creating a good scenario for her
Mm-hmm.
because of her disability to be, I thought everybody will have eyes on her. And it was the wrong, she was so socially isolated from the people that she needed. And those were not teachers and administrators and, nurses and,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure she was staying upright. This was for her mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think one thing that you could also do to kind of encourage the small things as well, a lot of parents will ask, how was your day at the end of a school day and all of that. Get more specific. Just get a little more
yes,
specific. I've talked about
agreed.
the questions that I do with my kids before, but we always ask the same questions, which gets a little monotonous sometimes for them, but sometimes it allows them to bring
Yeah.
up those things. So we always ask, what's something good that happened today? And they give me something specific. What's something bad that happened today? And they give me something specific. What's something you hope happens again? And then what homework do you have? Of course.
Yeah. I know. Well, and so we've got the dough making activity that's in the book, and this is what I was doing when I was doing these workshops at these schools. And as we're making the dough, I tell parents, I say parents, grandparents, whoever the adult is that's in the child's life. But if you want to ask a great question, I said, when you're making dough or doing something like that, I said, with dough, if you aren't happy with the way something is turning out, you can just squash it and start over, flatten it, start over. And so I said, if you look at life that way, can you imagine how wonderful it would be if you could change something in your life just that
Mm-hmm.
quickly, that easily? So, and then I say, so if you could change something in your life, and boy, that's a really interesting, that's something that, and I've had kids that'll immediately say, you know, I would change classrooms so I wouldn't have to be around this kid, or I would change, it's just, it's interesting to ask. That's a very specific question that you can take from an everyday activity,
Mm-hmm.
and those kinds of questions are great because you're very specific, and
Yeah.
it forces them to be a little bit more thoughtful
Yeah.
about,
I like that one. I wrote it down because I definitely want to ask my kids, although I suspect I know what their answers are going to be. So we'll see. We'll see how spot on I am. We'll see how spot on I am with those. And maybe I'll get even more specific and say, like, is there anything not at home that you wish you
Yeah.
could change in your
Well,
life?
my feeling is I think you probably have some pretty good conversations with your
Yes.
kids.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah. No, I really do. And both of my kids are really
yeah,
great. Um,
yeah.
no complaints there, but they're going to say that, like, don't make us do the dishes is pretty much what
Well,
yeah they're gonna say stuff like that.
and that's valid. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but that
it
is
is.
valid.
It is, but I don't like doing the dishes, so it's their chore.
I don't either. I get it. I get
Oh,
it.
yep. um Rose, of course, if you've got something to share, absolutely share it. Kim says TikTok chatty dad talks about switching from, is there something you want to talk about tonight, which is a yes or no question. He switched to, what do you want to tell me or talk about? And his kids have learned to save things for that part of bedtime. Yes, I think my kids save stuff up
Nice.
for
I
the
like
the
that.
ritual of the questions
Yeah.
also. They'll specifically remember, especially the something bad. It's important for them to know you can talk, and you can and should talk about things that are bad as well as talk about things that are
Yeah.
good. But yeah, I like because if you ask a teenager, especially, how was your day? Fine. Is there something you want to talk
Fine.
about?
Oh, I know.
No.
Fine.
Like, yeah,
No.
asking those where they can just give you that one word answer. Of course, they're going to opt for that. Of
Yeah.
course, because it's easy.
Yeah. You can always use what was the one thing today that gave you the most joy or that surprised you the most, and what was the thing
Hmm.
that challenged you the most, or What was the most difficult thing you had to deal with today? I mean, there are so many ways to frame where you can
Yeah.
say, let's talk about something that you're so grateful for that today, and maybe let's talk about that you weren't very happy about.
Yep. I like
So,
that. I know we've talked a little bit about anxiety, and it's very common, especially for kids who feel different. How can parents help their kids cope with that feeling of I'm anxious or that feeling of dread sometimes?
anxiety is a tough one. And depending on their level, there are there are all kinds of resources, and I know this just from having a kid with debilitating anxiety. We reached a point where I knew it was far beyond my ability to help her. But I had to actually do a deep dive into it myself.
Mm,
I have had I've had anxious moments, and not what I would say like panic attack moments, but I've had extremely anxious moments in my life. But this is where a lot of times she lives. And
mm,
I had to I had to quit dismissing that, and I had to kind of, like I say, do a deep dive into it. One of the greatest things that we did together last year was we went and saw Inside Out 2,
oh, I bawled. I
and
absolutely
oh,
bawled.
I tell you, I wrote my reaction to that. I created a TikTok and I just wrote it was one of my best TikToks that I did for my business because I just wrote out my feelings after going and seeing Inside Out 2 with her. And it was so great. People really responded to that
Hmm.
because I said, we just went, she said, Mom, I want to go see this movie together. And I highly recommend the movie to anybody who has kids who are dealing with
Yes.
anxiety because literally seeing it from the inside out changes your perspective. And I felt it almost makes me cry thinking about it now because I just turned to her and I said, I need to look at things differently
Mm,
with you. I know that. And this helped me. And so I really feel like if you have a child who is suffering from anxiety, it is incumbent on you to find out just how bad the anxiety is. You need to become much more if it's something that you're not familiar with, become more familiar with it.
yeah.
Find out what your resources are. Find out I gotten workbooks for her. I've gotten workbooks for me. I've gotten books for her, I've gotten books for me. I wanna know how I can treat it that's not dismissive,
Hmm.
and that's something I had to work on, where I wouldn't just I couldn't just say, Just breathe through it. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Calm down, breathe through it." I had to step back and really again, I had to take one of my own empathy pills. I needed to step
Hmm.
back, try to put myself in her shoes, and see things from her perspective, and that was not an easy thing for me. Watching the movie Inside Out helped me a lot
Yeah.
because it allowed me to look at things differently and that has helped us to have more conversations. So I really, really, really recommend that you have to look at it in a two-pronged way where it's not just something that you're trying to help them through, but it's something that you have to help yourself become better at dealing with your child because it's bigger than you think.
Yeah.
I can tell you firsthand, it's bigger than you think.
Yeah. And Inside Out, the first one is excellent. We went and saw the second one
Yes.
in theaters, and I took tissues because I already knew. Like I bawled on the first one. I took tissues on the second one. I asked how old was he when that came out? What year did that come out? So that came out last year. So he was like 17, maybe
Yeah.
maybe only 16, but 16, 17. And I was like, "Are you gonna need tissues?" And he was like, "I won't need tissues." I was like, "I'm taking extra because I think you're gonna need them." And sure enough, halfway through the movie, he was like, "Mom." So
Mhm.
but
It
it is so
They
so
did a
good.
good job with that movie. They did such a
He
good
really did.
job with
Yep.
that movie. And just the fact that you don't know what's gonna set
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know what's gonna set it off.
Yeah.
And you think that you think your kid has some level of control over that, and you just need to see the
Yeah,
movie. It
it's great.
helps give you some perspective. It really is a very, very good movie.
Yeah.
Done very well.
Really, really well done. I think the next one they need to do needs to be like fast forward to or switch focus to the mom going through perimenopause or menopause. Please. I would watch it 100%.
So funny you say that, because so Kelly and Mark, the live with Kelly and Mark, Kelly Ripa and Mark
Yep.
Willis, their Halloween, I found their Halloween special this last year, they did a spoof, and it's called Inside Out, and I believe it's Inside Out 50, and it's her going through menopause, and so
Please.
it's hilarious.
Do.
Yeah,
I want a whole movie of it.
Up on YouTube.
I'll look it up.
It's hilarious because she talks about losing joy, and she's out searching for joy, and says, "Oh, please tell me that joy didn't get lost along with, what was it? I can't remember it. Metabolism." She's like, "Joy got lost, and so did metabolism," and the whole thing is hilarious.
Yeah, I'll look that one up for
sure.
sure. I'll look that one up for
It's
sure.
funny.
Yeah. Hey, Quantum, how are you today? We are talking about youth and disabilities and schools. And if you have anything you want to chat about, feel free to pop that into the chat while we're live here. Also, we have a giveaway. Don't forget to enter that giveaway if you would like to. And Rose says, so I have a very severe case of ADHD. And when I was in pre-K, I was put in a corner on a beanbag at school, except for lunch. And even then I was being punished for being so hyper. I was not allowed to eat, and I was forced to do crafts. And that's why I'm such a crafty person. But besides all that, all I did was sit on a beanbag all day in a corner of class, and the teacher also forced me to wear a weighted vest, so it would be harder for me to move. And I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until the end of pre-K. And I would love to say, like, I hope this was ages and ages ago. But it truly is just so dependent on how your school is set up, your individual educators, your administrators, your parents as well. Like, it's all so highly dependent, and it sucks that it's down to the parent to be hyper vigilant about everything that's going on. But it kind of is right now, I think. And
it is.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer that so many kids still slip through those cracks. And yeah, really sorry that you went through that for sure. But yeah, but
I'm glad that there's some silver lining in all of it, that she has developed. She really leaned into developing the craft side. I mean, that's yeah. It's, if there's a silver lining, that would be it. That I'm happy. So, and my husband is very ADHD, and he's great at knitting. I'll just throw that out.
There you go.
Wonderful at knitting.
Another little connection. Yeah, I mean, you got something great out of it, but what a shitty way to arrive to something great. Yes. That's a bummer. That really is.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
How does My Crummy World help kids develop resilience and self-worth?
Well, so my books and all of the products that align with my mission, they all have stories. Like my baking book has stories and activities. One of the stories focuses on, it's actually called Second Best. And it's a true story taken from my daughter when she was second grade, being told that she was somebody's second best friend. And then she immediately burst into tears. And at the time, I did not know how to respond to her. And so we go through the story, and at the end, there are discussion prompts. And essentially what it is having a discussion with kids about, hey, if you are going to rank your friendships, which a lot of girls do, that's more of a girl thing than a boy thing. That's fine. But you have to know that there are going to be consequences. You may not always come out on top. These are the kinds of conversations you have to start having with your, saying, if you're going to rank your friendships, so are your friends, so are other people. How do you think that's going to make them feel? How does it make you? You didn't like being number two. How do you think somebody else does? Those are the kinds of conversations and resources and things that I have in my books. Oh, and the Catch the Match game, which you referenced, which is in the giveaway. This is just filled with, it's a memory game, a concentration game filled with positive affirmations like, I am kind, I am powerful, and I stand up for myself. I take turns when I others. I trust myself to make good decisions. all it is just, I say it, positive affirmations on a loop. It's repetition, trying to develop resources and things to start getting kids in a much more positive mindset, reinforcing the right kinds of thoughts and behaviors, and having real conversations. That's what My Crummy World is all about.
Mm.
I'm working on developing, I have them. I'm going to market them better in the future, but I'm developing problem solving packets that actually put put a problem. I mean, it's like there's a story, and in the story there's a problem, and then I have finger puppet versions of my characters where girls can act out the story and they come up with a solution. And then they can submit it to my website, because I feel like if we can raise a generation of girls who can solve their own problems, that gives them more autonomy, that gives them more self-confidence, that takes the onus off the teachers in the classrooms to solve all problems between girls. There's a lot of drama in classrooms. If girls can start handling some of this drama and solving some of these problems without getting the teacher involved, would be such a great thing for teachers and for girls. So that's just kind of the mission of my brand. And I'm trying to develop a generation of more confident, kinder, and better problem solving girls. So we'll see. Hope I get there.
Lofty goals.
That's my
You
mission.
got some really
That's
big
my
goals.
mission.
Yep.
One at a
It's a
time.
big
I
mission.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
It is. It is. But someone's got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you can get even a tiny step forward for that,
Exactly.
or impact, one kid in one school, it's
Even one kid. I
yep.
know.
Yep.
What? Just one kid. I know.
Absolutely. It sounds like you've already done that for sure. So one more. Your goal is just always going to be one
Yes.
more.
One. If I could get one a week, I'd be happy.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yep. Are there any additional specific programs or resources you recommend for parents who are navigating the school system with a child who has disabilities? I know you mentioned a couple of books. Anything else that you want to throw out there?
Yeah. It's like I said, um, I think parents need to make sure that you know where to go to look for,
Mm-hmm.
if it's an IEP or a 504, do you know where to find that information? Online, there are all kinds of resources. I know I met with a gal, she's a teacher, and she's got lots of resources for teachers, and I think it's Mrs. D's Corner. I hope I got that right. And she's actually somewhat local to me. She's in the same area, and she has a huge following on social media. And she talks about IEPs and 504s and how to do the pay. By just finding that person or finding that resource is a great place to start if you have a child with a disability. And again, the other thing you have to do is you can't be afraid to reach out and start asking the right questions of medical to even. So many parents are afraid of diagnoses, and I'm not saying just in search of a diagnosis. You're an answer, and an answer will help your child ultimately. It'll help them pave the way to getting the accommodations and the resources they need, or if it's an IEP, an actual plan that fits. It's molded to
Mm-hmm.
what their specific needs are. These are things you have to do, and of course, I throw out, there are so many great books that you should be reading. The ones I've thrown out today are focused more on the things that I'm interested in at the moment, which of course are trying to change the behavior of girls, which is that girls can be mean, but the anxious generation is a big one. There are a couple of others. Um, I'm not gonna. You should see my bookshelf. I have so many books. I'm gonna stick with those for now
Okay.
because those I think are just so. I truly believe the anxious generation is a book that every parent needs to read right now. I think it's because of where we're going with technology. I think that parents need to have the edge. You need to know the enemy,
Yeah.
and the enemy is right in front of you. So,
Yeah. It's
but
definitely one
that's pretty much.
that I'm adding for sure.
Yes, yeah, highly recommend.
Bite Mark sent this question in ahead of time. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Oh, so my favorite poem is an Emily Dickinson poem. It's called Hope is the thing with feathers. And I had to look it up this morning. I've got it. It's very short and it's a wonderful poem. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. I love that because I feel like hope right now is something that people are clinging to
Mm-hmm.
in in the worst weather, in the highest wind. It's something that we have to hold on to because it's in some ways it's the only thing that we have, and it asks nothing of us in return. You know, that's the beautiful thing about hope is that it asks absolutely nothing of us, and it's something that we absolutely need to cling to with everything we have right now.
Most definitely.
So,
What is your favorite life hack?
so I kind of stole, I took a life hack that somebody shared with me at a conference too. Her name is Suzanne Castle. If you're out there, and I know there are other people out there who she is, she had us do this, like she calls it a brain dump, where you take a minute and you think of everything. Because I have a hard time, especially on Monday mornings, of prioritizing what I need to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm doing now is I'm stealing her hack and I'm creating it in a child's version that I'm going to put on my website and parents can get it. I will have a downloadable version of this. I'm going to say within the next, give me a week or 2 weeks, I'm going to have it on there. But I'm calling it, and I have it actually, and I don't think I have it at my fingertips right now, but you'll see it. But I call it a brainstorm, and it has Rachel Rye, and she's got an umbrella. And so I'm telling kids just to brainstorm. And then during that brainstorm, anything they think of that they need to do, they want to do, like within the next week, just write it down. And it means fun things, difficult things, homework, extracurriculars, write it down. And then the next page, they separate their raindrops. So they write it into a little raindrop. I have all these big raindrops and they write them in the raindrops. And then on the next page, they take the raindrops and they divide them into 3 different buckets. And the buckets are what I absolutely have to do, what I can do if there's time, and what I might do if I have the option, but I don't really need to worry. So trying to teach kids at a younger age how to take this,
Mm-hmm.
to prioritize it, and to start getting things done, because I needed to do this so much more when I was younger and didn't. And I love this whole idea. So I'm adapting it and trying to make a version of it for kids. But I love doing it myself. I give myself like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and I just think of everything I want to get done. Just let yourself go and think of all the things you need to get done. And then I just start picking and choosing, and I find ways to prioritize it. But I want to make it even more structured for kids so that they have tools, tools to
Mm-hmm.
help them prioritize their week. So, and again, I'm going to put this on my website at
I
some
love
point,
it.
say the next week or so.
I love it. Whenever you do, let
So,
me know. I'll make sure to post a link of that for
I will.
everybody.
I
Also,
will.
I'll post that in our Discord. So if you're not in our Discord, make sure that you join there because I will most definitely post that under the resources channel, and you'll be able to find it there for sure. But yeah, I think that's great because
All right.
it is hard sometimes for kids to take a concept of like, oh, I want to do all these things, to even know,
Mhm.
oh, I should write them down. Like that's a thing that has to be taught.
Yes.
You have to teach. That's a skill you got to teach. And then, oh, I should prioritize these. Like that's a thought that
Yeah.
not a lot of kids are going to have on their own. So
Nope.
yeah,
Yep.
I love
I
that.
know
I
it.
love that.
Believe me, I know it.
Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. If you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
I would really like to do away with the word weird.
Mm.
That's a word that has always struck me and I just remember watching a student, this was not my own kid, but watching a student react to somebody saying that something about him was weird. And And it's funny because for that particular student, what the other student was deeming as being weird was so normal for
Mm,
him. And just eh, seeing his face just absolutely fall, it was like watching him just kind of shrivel up
aw,
because what he considered to be something normal, somebody else thought was weird. And again, this is an area where I wish you could just, I wish that was, I just wish I could do away with that. Have the one kid say to the other, that's so interesting. Why do you do
yeah.
that? Or, just rephrase that and get rid of this word weird, because
Mhm,
weird just seems so negative when weird is really just different.
mhm.
And different is not bad. Different is not bad. Different is different. So I have my next book, which will come out eventually, is called My Crummy Guide to Being Different. And I'm going to take on this whole notion of let's do away with weird, because I don't like weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like the sound of the word because
Mhm.
yeah. So that would be, if I could do away with something, I wish I could have done away with that whole scenario for that poor kid, because it made me feel sad. That's one of those times where I just wish a different one chosen, and we could,
Yeah.
instead of saying things are weird, just say, okay, well, you do things differently.
Mhm.
And that's okay. It's just different. It's not weird.
Yeah. Go back to that
So
curiosity again.
back to curiosity. Curiosity is the key.
Mhm. It really
It
is. It
really
really
is.
is. Well, I'm going to open it up to any more community Q&A. If you guys have anything you want to ask of Shannon, feel free to pop it into the chat. We'll make sure to address it. And Shannon, I'll just give you the floor for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and post your socials one more time so that folks can find you and connect with you. And while I'm doing that, if there's anything you want to throw out there as far as more recommendations or different resources or anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about, I will just give you the floor for a little bit.
All right. Well, I so appreciate having this opportunity to talk a little bit about who I am and what I do. I really encourage, if you are parents, to take a look at my socials and see some of the things that I post. I try on my socials, I really try to post a lot of, I say advice, it's not necessarily advice. I post things that I think are great tips and things for parents. One of which is I actually have the 4 steps to take if you determine that you are the parent of a mean girl. And
Mm,
that sometimes goes over very well and sometimes does not, but I think it's an important thing to actually put out there. And I was addressing a group of parents one night, and when I was talking about some of the problems that girls are having in school, and I said, we need to start having these kinds of conversations with our daughters so that they feel free to come up and talk to us. Uh, if they're not doing that, I said, you could have one of 2 problems. Maybe they are having problems with their friends and they're not telling you, or there could be that possibility that your daughter is the problem. She is the mean girl. And a couple of parents came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for saying that, because there was a particular parent in the room that we were hoping you would address." So, which I thought was kind of funny. But I rotate these kinds of things on my social medias. I rotate them through every so often because I get asked a lot. People will say, "Can you please go back and repost the 4 different things that you can do if you suspect that your daughter is the mean girl?" And
mm,
it's essentially, you have to observe the behaviors. It goes through observing the behaviors and talking to them about it, and then actually suggesting some kinds of corrections to the behaviors, and it talks about how to do that, and even role playing different scenarios with your daughter and getting feedback from friends of hers. And all of these things, like I said, I'll be posting, and I've if you go back into my social media, you'll find it, because it's not hard to find, and I'll post it to my stories quite often, or share it to my stories. But these are things that, as parents, I think you should always just kind of be on the lookout. It's good to know. It's good to know what to look for, and it's also good to know what to do if you find it. And just observe, observe, observe. The most important thing that you need to be doing is observing.
mm.
one of the things I love to tell parents, if you are the carpool person and taking kids from after school to, various extracurricular activities, whether it's athletic or otherwise, turn down your music and listen to the conversation. Just listen. If you want to know what's going on with your kids, it's not that hard to figure. You have to start listening, listen to the conversations, and I've heard so many parents who've said, I learned so much just by sitting quietly and listening to the kinds of conversations that my kid and her friends were having. And I did it all the time when I was leading. And they knew I was up there. I don't know if
Mhm.
they thought I was listening or listening to my music, but they knew I was there, and it didn't stop them from having
Yeah.
conversations. So these are easy little hacks that I think most parents know. And I just think it's important to use whatever tools you can that are at your disposal, and pay attention, observe. And if you can find things on my socials or on my website, resources that will help you, that makes me very happy. And that's why it's there, because I'm hoping to create all kinds of resources for parents. So,
Yeah. I like that. Got a couple of comments in the chat that I want to make sure that we get to. Kim, first of all, says thank you both, and also says volunteer in your kid's classroom so you know who your child is talking about. My daughter was upset in kindergarten because a girl said she wasn't her friend. My response was good. So yeah,
that's
she
funny.
didn't know how to be a good friend. Yeah, that's a great point. Rose says, in my opinion, everyone is different in their own way. I absolutely agree. And Rose would also
I agree.
like to know, why is there so much stigma to being different?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. See, Rose, if I could dive into my next book, and I actually have it done. It's just something I've had to shelve for now because I did my baking book. But I jump into this whole My Crummy Guide to Being Different is we need to change the connotation of the word different, because I think it's so important to be different. We need to celebrate the fact that we're different, because if we start teaching our kids, if we were all clones of each other, what a boring place this would be, this world would be so boring. It requires us being unique and being different to
Mm-hmm.
make it work. And I really think that we need to start trying to celebrate that with our kids more. And it's a challenge because in this social media driven society that we live in, girls are being literally shown and taught how to look, how to dress, how to act, how to wear their hair, how to wear their makeup, it is established to create followers and clones. And I really want to push back against that. I want to push back against that. I think that social media is a bad thing and I hope that parents will constantly stay in their kids' ears and remind them, just hold on to the things that make them different,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what will make them stand out among all the rest. So
Yeah.
celebrate the uniqueness. Go, Rose. I love it.
And this ties into Quantum's comment as well, because she said if called weird or any other word, the person would have to give value to the person saying it for it to be harmful. So it could be a self-worth issue. And I
Yeah.
absolutely see where you're coming from, because my kids are self-proclaimed weirdos.
Oh, so am I.
And
So am
and they
I.
embrace it. And it's like, if
And
someone calls my 11-year-old weird, he's gonna go, yeah, of course. That's me.
right. And that's because they're in a household where celebrated and different has.
Yeah.
I wish that we're that way across all households, but
Yeah.
unfortunately it's not. But I agree. Oh, my kids, they love being weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, they have weird parents.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, like,
So,
the connotation around the word use makes a huge difference too. If someone's saying it in a
yeah,
mean-spirited way, your kid's going to pick up on that. Just like if somebody
right.
is saying something super sarcastically that sounds nice but truly isn't meant to be nice.
But
Like,
it's not.
Bless your pea
Oh,
picking
yeah.
heart. Depending on how I say that,
100.
it's going to mean two different things. So,
Exactly.
it's the word choice, and it does make a difference. Your intentions really make a difference. So,
Yes, agreed. And yeah, it's similar to the word different when I think that different should be celebrated, weird should be celebrated, and maybe we are working toward creating a world where that will happen. I
mhm.
just remember that poor little boy's face
Yeah,
when he
yeah,
heard that word,
yep,
and it was not. He knew it was not meant in a
yeah.
very positive
Kids know. They pick up on
way.
more than most people give them
They
credit
do.
for. They absolutely
Oh,
know.
they
They
do.
understand. They understand a lot more than you think that they do. Like
Yeah,
they can read into
agreed.
a situation. They can read into what you're saying. They read between the lines very well. And also they are
They
listening
sure
when you
do.
don't think they're listening.
Yeah. Yep.
All the time.
Exactly.
I've learned that the hard
Exactly.
way.
Oh yeah.
Well, Shannon, thank you so very much for taking the time out and having this conversation with us. I think that it's been great.
Absolutely.
And
I do
everyone,
too, and I really enjoyed it.
yep, everyone who is here, I'm going to go ahead and close the question queue and I'm going to close this giveaway. So stick around to find out who wins.
All right.
And I will be
All
right
right.
back after I disconnect with Shannon as well. So don't go anywhere. And again, Shannon, just thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. I hope this conversation with Shannon Addison hit home for you the way it did for me. We covered a lot, from what it means to parent a child with a disability to how harmful it is when schools and other students don't recognize or understand what those disabilities really look like. And yeah, some of it was heavy, because the reality is that kids are facing real barriers every day, especially when their struggles are invisible. If you're a parent trying to navigate IEPs, 504s, or just survive another school year without feeling like you're in a constant battle mode, you are not alone. If you're a teacher or a school staff member trying to show up for your students, but working with limited resources and impossible expectations, you are seen and appreciated. And if you're someone who didn't even realize how tough this stuff can be for families, I'm so glad you're here listening. That's how change starts. Shannon reminded us how powerful emotional connection and creativity can be, even when the system feels like it's falling short. Whether it's telling stories in the kitchen, connecting over dough, or using playful characters to open up serious conversations, she's doing the kind of work that builds confidence and compassion in kids. And honestly, a lot of adults need that too. If something in today's episode resonated with you, please take a second to like, subscribe, and leave a review or a comment wherever you're listening. Those things are free and they really help people find these conversations, and it helps me keep up the motivation to continue making them. And remember, even tacos fell apart and we still love them, and I still love you. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.